Hi, everybody. I am testing sound. Let me know how my sound is. Testing, test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Testing. Okay, great. I have sound. We really needed that. Okay, let's begin. Welcome to my Facebook Q&A. This is very important to me, what we're going to be discussing today. My name is Dr. Emma Hussein, and my background is in orthopedic surgery, but I've spent the last 17 years or so teaching, and it's been exclusively USMLE, so I've seen thousands of students, and with med school tutors, I've logged more than 5,000 hours of tutoring. So I feel like I've seen the entire range of students and a lot of the things that you struggle with as a student, as a resident, and even beyond that. So we're going to be talking about depression and the emotional burden of being in a medical residency or in medical school or being a physician in general. So let's begin. And again, I thank you so much for joining this or watching this video if you're watching it later, because I think this is something that's incredibly important and really not discussed enough. So why is this something that we need to discuss? Because life is hard, bad things happen, and people can be unsuccessful and not get what they want. So why do we need a particular forum to address this when it comes to medical students, residents, and physicians? And the simple answer is this is not normal life. These are not the normal work burdens, the normal stressors. It's an abnormal situation. And so I saw some likes. Good, you agree. It is not normal. It's a crazy world, the world of med school, pre-med, residency. It's incredibly competitive. I think that's a huge stressor. It's long. You have 8 years usually of, thank you, someone thinks it's an important topic. I agree. You have a long timeline for your training. You've got usually 8 years of university, including med school, and then the residency on top of that. And that creates a burden, a financial burden, because if your friends or peers did 4-year programs, then they're already out making money, paying off their student loans, looking at houses, getting on with life, family, things like that, travel. And if you're in medical school, you're still a student. And if you get caught up with the exams, then you're a student for even longer. And so, you often feel like you're in this eternal student state, which isn't normal. Most people are going into some debt, which is normal, but the extent to which we do this as medical students and residents is a little bit extreme. The atmosphere is incredibly competitive. So you're not getting a lot of support from your peer group, because your peer group are your competitors. If you're in medical school, you're competing with them for residencies. And if you're in a residency, then you're competing for fellowships, for positions, perhaps, if it's a particularly competitive hospital. So got a few new people. Hi, thank you, and welcome. So this is incredibly stressful. The schedule is stressful. There's sleep deprivation. There's no time for self-care. People gain weight. They find it difficult to maintain diet and exercise regimens. It's difficult to keep up with your friends and your family, nieces, nephews, children, grandparents. It's just a huge disconnect and disjoint from the way that most humans are able to live their lives. Even though life is hard, I think this life is really one of the hardest that you can choose. And it can really wear people down. So it's not normal. And in addition, if you make a mistake, the consequences are pretty serious because we're talking about human life and the human condition. And so there's a burden of guilt there. You see things in medicine that most people don't see. You see pain, you see suffering, you see death, you see hopelessness, and you're not always able to solve that. And so all of this comes together to me to say, we really need to talk about this because this is a special situation. And any feelings that you have are probably normal for the situation because the situation is truly not normal. And one of the biggest things I think that happens that creates this abnormality, in addition to all of the things that occur in medical school and residency that are hard, that your friends in law and who did biochemistry degrees, excuse me, they're not experiencing, is that it's kind of a self-contained situation. You're in your medical school with a certain number of people, and you're grouped together daily and weekly. You're grouped together in rotations. You're grouped together for your exams and your classes. You have absolutely no perspective when you're in that group of what life is like outside the group. It's a self-contained group with very abnormal, dysfunctional dynamics. Yeah, it's not a holistically kind and functional group. It's one that tends to create insecurity and a feeling of either uselessness or inadequacy. And I think a lot of this has to do with what people are putting out there within the group. Because part of the nature of this dysfunctional group, to which I belong, by the way, is that because we're all competing, we don't really let our guard down. And that means that we don't really have the ability to know what's really going on with someone else. Instead, we see what they showed us. And what they showed us is not necessarily what's happening. For example, I'm trying to share screen here, and I can no longer find the share screen button. Can my backup people give me a hint on where the show screen button has gone to? Because I don't see it. And if not, we can save that for another time. But it seems to be not visible. Yeah, that's too bad. Well, we may have time for this later. What I was going to show you is a picture that I put up on Facebook where I look great, because that's what I put out on Facebook. And okay, so we don't know where the share screen button has gone. So that's okay. We can discuss it. Anyway, so I have a picture on Facebook where I look really glamorous. That's the picture that I put. It's the profile picture. Everybody liked it. I looked amazing. I never look like that. That picture was the best picture of about 50 pictures that I took on people like this on a day where I looked particularly good. And that's what I put out there. I also had a picture of myself, and maybe I should put this as my profile page, where my hair had become some kind of afro-like structure. I had no makeup on, and I slightly resembled some sort of small rodent. And that's mostly what I look like. And so all of this was just to illustrate what people are telling you when you see your peers on Facebook and, you know, they just aced their USMLE, went for a run, and then baked a loaf of bread. That's not what happened. That may have been what happened to a certain extent, but that's not really the truth of their life. And since you're always comparing yourself, got lots of hearts for that, you're always comparing yourself to this idealized version of these other people. You always feel like you're coming up short, and you're not. But it's very easy for me to say that. I just want to put that out there and say this is just another reason why we need to have this discussion, because what we're looking at is comparing ourselves to a false ideal within a situation that's incredibly dysfunctional and abnormal and is consistently that way. Every day it's sick people. There aren't healthy people. That's not the way that this works. And it hurts, it's difficult, and it takes something out of you. And sometimes it takes too much away from you, and you find yourself struggling. And I've had my own experiences with depression, so I know what this is like. I know the before, the during, and the after. And that's why I really, really wanted to talk about this. And I wanted to talk about some of the things that we can do and how we can stay healthy and how we can address mental health. So given that for me, the biggest issue with our peer group or with the little closed society that we're in is that it is closed and that it's dysfunctional, competitive, and untruthful. What people are putting out there is not the real situation. I think the first thing to do, the easiest thing you can do if you feel like your self-esteem is suffering, or your level of energy and joy in life is starting to diminish a little bit, is make sure that you take yourself out of that peer group, which means keeping in touch with friends that you had that aren't medical, particularly. Staying close to your family if you are someone that's close to your family, and continuing to do activities that don't involve medical school. Whatever it was that you used to do, you may not be able to do it to the same extent, but you should be able to do it somewhat, even just to a limited extent, whether it's running or painting or playing the violin or dancing, could be anything, redecorating. But whatever you do, try to keep up some of your background things. It takes time away from study, I agree, but at the same time, if you're not mentally healthy, then your study's not effective. And that's where we start to get into this slippery slope of feeling unsuccessful, which creates a future lack of success, which makes one feel unsuccessful, which creates more unsuccessfulness, and so on. I recommend actually that you have a regular best friend, relative, mentor, lots of loves for that. Great, thank you. That you can check in once a week or once a month, maybe just a quick Skype call, and just specifically talk about how you're feeling within the situation, because most people aren't comfortable talking to their peers. There's the perception that depression, or just the feeling of depression, even if it's not clinical depression, makes you weak or gives you the appearance of being weak or a psychiatric patient. So you have to have someone that you can talk to about this and say, this week I felt like quitting. This week I felt like I will never be a doctor, that everybody knows things. Thank you for the thumbs up on that. Everybody knows things that I don't know. Everybody seems to be getting it and I'm not getting it. I just failed a midterm, or I failed the USMLE, and my 7 best friends in school passed. And, you need to be able to verbalize this to someone that's not part of the group and have that connection to somebody that's living like a normal, non-medical life. So I think that's really important for mental health. Another really important thing for mental health is to accept that just like we go to the doctor and we get vaccinated and we get, pap smears and prostate exams and things like that, that there should be a level of preventative medicine for mental health, which means that seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist periodically is not an indication that you have any psychiatric disease. I think it's let's just, you know, find the place where we can learn tools to deal better with some of these stressors. And so the idea of therapy, or even just brief intermittent sessions with a psychologist, that to me is something that I really recommend. I think every human being probably needs that. And in spite of time restraints, now you can see people online, so you don't have to travel. It's completely personal. That person won't be from your small town or from your university group or anything. It'll be completely a stranger and confidential. And you can talk about these things. And I've found that that's been really good, is talking to a professional and also talking to somebody that was non-medical. That really kept my feet on the ground when I felt like I was getting carried away by the craziness of residency and these unrealistic expectations. And then moving forward from that, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it gets so bad that it is depression. And I've had a lot of students struggle with this, because if you feel like the way that you're acting and what you're experiencing and how you're behaving is depressed, but it's due to the situation, this is a very hard process to go through, then you assume that if you get through the process, then the depression will go away and then everything will be fine. You think that it's the actual state of being in your residency applications or trying to pass this exam. But I will take a small tangent to talk about a docuseries that I've been watching on monkeys. And I am getting somewhere with this. It turns out that monkeys live in small self-contained groups normally. And in captivity and in the wild, they're kept in the same. And the self-contained group is as self-reinforcing as the groups that we're all in, these tiny little medical focused groups, which are sometimes dysfunctional in the monkey world and sometimes a little more functional. And it turns out, excuse me, that when a monkey is feeling unsuccessful, which involves really him comparing himself to the rest of the group and saying, wow, I'm not very alpha and I can't climb as good as that guy, and I'm the last one to get the food. None of the women want to mate with me. I'm just a loser, right? They actually get depressed. They go off into corners. They pick out their fur. They don't socialize with the other monkeys. They don't eat. They get sick. And sometimes they even die. And in sanctuaries and zoos, what they try to do is take that monkey out of the situation, put him with a more functional group. But by the time the monkey has reached that emotional place where he's depressed, clinical depression, the change of environment doesn't affect a change in the internal feelings. So he goes to a more functional group. The situation that made him depressed is over. And yet he's still picking out his fur and hiding in the corner and rocking and not eating and getting sick. And it turns out that the one thing that is important here is to kickstart the change in mood with antidepressants. So I'm not advocating antidepressants, and not everybody needs antidepressants, but I did really want to put it out there that antidepressants can solve a problem that may not otherwise be solvable. And I think it's up to every individual to decide if he or she is at that stage. But I want it to be clear, and I want it to be known that sometimes you get to a point and you can't muscle your way through it. You can't motivate yourself into being not depressed. You can pass your USMLE, get a great residency, and that feeling remains, which, you know, that's something that you want to recognize, because the depression can drag on and there isn't a solution other than medication for some people. So I really wanted that to be mentioned. Thanks for the loves. And I also wanted to talk about asking yourself some questions as well, because medicine is this train. We're on it and it's just going, and it doesn't actually stop at any stations where you can get out and look around. That train's going, right? All the way to apparently being an attending in a hospital or having your own practice. And everyone's on the train with you. And getting off the train is very difficult because it doesn't stop. Everybody's going to the end of the line, allegedly. Remember, it's a self-contained group with kind of false perceptions of what's really going on. So I think that it's important, if you are struggling with medicine, just ask yourself this. If I won $5 million tomorrow, and I could pay off all my student loans, buy a house, and do whatever I wanted, would I still do this? Because we don't ask ourselves that. I know that when I was in residency, it took me a long time to actually be able to ask and answer that question. And it just wasn't available to me to ask. And yet, as you can see, I'm actually not practicing medicine anymore. I'm purely a teacher. At some point, I was able to ask and answer that question for myself. And it's not a yes or no answer to would I still be a doctor or still be a resident or still be a medical student if I had $5 million. I think the answer is, I'm not sure. I'm going to think about it. What other things do I want to do? And how much do I want to do medicine? And if you do really want to do medicine, it doesn't have to be the practice of medicine. There are many medical careers outside of medicine. I have one. I love it. I love my job. So I think one needs to be open to that, the possibility that maybe this is not the best choice for you, or that this isn't even really what you want. And again, it doesn't have to be a yes or no answer, but it's good to, ask the question. And I think those were the biggest points that came up for me when I was thinking about continuing a practice in orthopedic surgery versus moving to something that was a lot more gentle in terms of schedule and the kinds of people that I would be surrounded with. And so my answer was, yeah, I still want to be a doctor, but not like this. And just ask yourself the question. So that was most of what I wanted to discuss today. I have a couple of other little points that I wanted to make. So Psychology Today has a website where you can find any kind of psychiatrist, male, female, anxiety-based, depression-based, location-based. And that's a good resource to look at if you're thinking of doing some preventative mental health care, which I think is important and should be stressed more in our whole population, but particularly us, the ones that are in this crazy competitive group. This has become such a topical issue that there's even a movie coming out about it called Do No Harm. And I'm going to provide some links to that in the chat box as well. And I think my final thing before I sign off and add these links is there's really nothing wrong with you. If you're feeling a certain way, depressed, anxious, hopeless, worthless, angry, and it's becoming difficult in this situation, I think, again, just to reinforce, these are normal responses to an abnormal situation. And so therefore, if you're responding normally and that response is unpleasant, I think you have to reach out for help with the response. And I think for me, just understanding that when I was going through this process, that a lot of people felt this way and didn't talk about it. And the more that I've worked with students, particularly when it's one-on-one, I see the despair, I see the frustration, I see the insecurity, and I want everybody out there to know that basically everybody's experiencing this to some degree. And because of that, it's just normal. So therefore, we do normal things to address it, just like we vaccinate. I wish there were a mental health vaccination you could get once a year, just to stop all of these thoughts from getting in. But I do really recommend talking to someone, professional or unprofessional, doesn't matter, but somebody. So thank you so very much for this time. Thank you. See a few thanks. I've got a question from email, and this is a really good question, actually. For students who are feeling a lot of pressure from their parents to pursue medicine, how can they begin to tell their families this may not be their path? That was actually my struggle as well. Because you are the hopes and dreams of your parents. That's definite. And you are also the person your parents love the most in the world, and they want you to be happy. And if they themselves are not doctors, they may not understand the situation that you're in. And if they are doctors, they're from a different generation of doctors. And many physicians that would be your parents' age will tell you, if I had to take the USMLE today, I would fail. That's what they'll say. So what you're struggling with is different than what your parents struggled with, and the competition's different, and the standards and the levels are different. So therefore, that's one thing that needs to be communicated if they are doctors. The second thing is that your parents don't want you to be unhealthy. I think it's really important just to communicate what this is taking out of you. That there's no point in being successful if you're miserable, and there's no point in being successful if you're suicidal, and there's no point in being successful if you can't maintain relationships with family and friends and have a life that's productive and successful within itself. You know, life is many things, and career is one of them. What I told my parents, which may be helpful to some of you, is that I said, I'm never going to be happy doing this way. I'm never going to be happy. I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to wake up every day miserable. I'm going to end every day miserable. And I'm not sure where that's going to take me over a year or 2 years or 10 years. So that was not that solved the problem, but I think it was helpful. Another thing that's important is it is your life. And at some point, you have to live your life for yourself and not for your parents. And that's something that connects to self-care, which is that we have obligations to people. We have obligations to our family, to our spouses, to our children. But if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not in any position to improve the lives of those people. And in fact, you can bring those people down. So in order for you to be your best person, you have to follow your thoughts, your dreams, and your desires, and not the thoughts and dreams and desires of someone else. It's very difficult. Parents put money into this. They put their expectations into it. They hopefully have been supportive during the process. So it's not easy, but it's much easier to disappoint your parents than it is to live a miserable life, I think. And yeah, nothing's that easy. And saying no to medicine, if that's truly what you wish to do, is as hard as saying yes. They're both hard, and both of them involve changing your life forever and having really good, self-knowledge. I'll also say that 17 years after the process of not choosing to continue with orthopedic surgery, my parents don't care. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. I have a great job. I love my students. I have great relationships. And this was all so little in retrospect. At the time, it was a big deal. But you'll see. Your parents are always going to love you. Yeah. Are there any other questions by email, chat? It looks like that's it. So I'm going to put a couple of links into the chat box. One is the Do No Harm movie, which I have not seen, but I am extremely excited to see it. Thank you. Someone said bravo. I appreciate that. So that's the first link. The second link is if you have any questions, we're here for you. We are med school tutors, and I'm including a phone number and an email address where you can reach us. And if you could do me a favor, I would really appreciate if you would share this video with people that you think might benefit from it. It's hard to ask for help. I just feel like if you stumble into the resource, you're blessed. And so if you can send that out to people that you think might benefit from it, I would be eternally grateful and look forward to some feedback from everyone, and apologize that I couldn't show you what I really look like, because it was truly terrible. And I wanted you to know that appearances are not all that they seem. So if there are no other questions, I thank you so much for your time. And thank you. Somebody just shared the video. I appreciate that so much. I hope to see you again on Facebook question and answer. And, they say put the picture in the comments. Let's see. They won't even let me do that. I'll put it in, let's see. It only lets me send an emoji, which is actually a lot like what the picture looked like. But we'll figure that out for the next one. Ugly pictures are always fun to share. So again, thank you so much. This was very, very important to me, and I'm very grateful that you all came. And I will see you again, I hope, on Facebook Live. So have a great day, and I will be signing off now.